Hey, Stephen, how's it going?
Oh, another beautiful day here in Orlando.
Absolutely. It gets warmer and warmer. It's getting into a furnace at this point, but it's all good, you know. I feel like summer is going to be a really sweltering one this time around, but you know, we've there's actually humidity and people complain about it, but actually it's pretty good for your skin, I hear. I was just talking to somebody today about the eczema, and people are moving here to Florida because of humidity. Have you heard that one
Oh,
before?
I've not, but I like it. I would take this over the dry any day for me.
Yeah, yeah, me too, actually. I don't mind humid climate. It's good. Cool. Well, it's a pleasure to have you, first of all. It's always a pleasure talking to you, and it's just wonderful to see all the wonderful things you do. And you know, you've been especially doing a lot of things for me and the community through the events that we do and giving back, and that's been absolutely great. I really appreciate it. Thank you for speaking at Orlando Innovation League and being a mentor at Startup Weekend, and a lot of people have benefited from your wisdom. And hopefully now we can get the benefit of your wisdom out into the internet here with this podcast and get some more people to engage with all the great ideas and content and cool stuff that you're doing. So I'll do a quick intro and then we can get right into some hopefully detailed conversation that helps people understand how you go about doing innovation and some of the cool stuff that you do. So real quick intro for everybody listening. Stephen Shapiro is one of the OGs of innovation. And you're one of the only people I know who's been doing innovation for, and I'm going to date you, sorry, 30 plus years. That's not something I hear every day. Like a lot of people think about innovation methodology as being very recent, like 10, 15 years at the most. But you've been doing it for 30 plus years. You founded and led a 20,000 person innovation practice at Accenture, which is just mind boggling when you think about it. You've created your own program, like a fast innovation process and the mastery program. And you've written 7 books, one of which is pivotal. And we're definitely going to talk about that, which launched just, what was it, last week, last month?
Last week.
Last week. There we go. It's hot off the press, and you guys should definitely check it out. I have not read the book yet, full disclosure. I'm hoping to get into it really quick, though. I loved your previous book, Invisible Solutions. Big fan of that, and I'm definitely using that in my practice as well. But yeah, I'm looking forward to hearing all about Pivotal and what you got going on there. But first, let's start with a little bit about background. I know I covered a little bit, but I'd love to for you to kind of share your history a little bit so people kind of get a context of what got you to where you are today and some of the experiences that you've had.
Yeah, so I'm actually an engineer. I graduated with a degree in industrial engineering, worked for Accenture right out of college. They were Arthur Andersen's management information consulting division at the time. And early in my career, I started using my engineering skills in something called business process reengineering. And I was one of the co-leaders of our practice. And what we did is we went into companies and we optimized their processes. And one of the things which I discovered was when we optimized a company's processes, they would downsize the workforce. And it didn't really hit me at first. I sort of rationalized it. And then at some point, I started to see the devastating impact on people losing their jobs. And I thought, I don't want to do this anymore. Just want to find a way of doing something good, a positive impact on society. And so I took a leave of absence, still at Accenture. And I realized I loved what I was doing. I loved the company, I loved consulting, but I wanted to help companies grow instead of shrink. And so I found it took me a while, but I found some people who were interested in creating a practice. We grew it to 20,000 people in 9 months. And it was just a really beautiful thing to be involved in that. And 2001, I was approached by a publisher to do my first book, 24/7 Innovation. That book came out. I left Accenture and I've been doing my own thing ever since. But for me, innovation, it's not just about the companies, it's about society. I mean, we need more innovation to solve some of our biggest problems.
Yeah, absolutely. And this is a word that gets thrown around so much, right? And I'm sure you see it as much as I do. Everybody's saying innovation, innovation. What does it really mean for you when you hear or use the word yourself, for when you use that word innovation?
So I tend to describe, this may be a little too esoteric, but when I think of innovation, I think of relevance. And what I mean by that is if you're a company, you offer something that's relevant, people want it, they value it, they desire it, and you're able to continue to do that for long periods of time. Now, relevance can come in a lot of different forms. If it's societal challenges, it's like, are we solving the right problems? And I think that's, when I sort of step back and really think about what most people get wrong about innovation is, I think, to me, innovation is not about ideas, but rather it is about identifying and prioritizing the biggest opportunities and challenges and using a systematic approach to find solutions to those. So if we're solving the important problems, if we're tapping into the biggest opportunities, well, we're going to make the biggest impact. Because not every problem is the same.
I love that because I kind of say kind of something similar, but it's not so much about the solution as in what problem are you solving. And I think a lot of people nowadays use the terminology of use cases, right? Okay, blockchain, what use case does it solve? AI, what use case does it solve? So at the end of the day, finding the right problem there is really the key thing in your mind, more than, there's many ways to skin a cat, but if you're focusing on the right problem, you're more likely to be innovative than not, right?
Absolutely. I mean, my philosophy has always been that if you're solving the wrong problem, I don't care how great the solution is, it doesn't matter. So if we were to divert our energies into solving problems that actually matter, digging into opportunities that will have the biggest impact, and we really focus our energies there, we get much bigger impact in the world. And I think that's sort of a lot of people think about the divergent aspects of innovation, like big, broad thinking. But to me, it's almost like that laser focus on what matters most. And my mantra has always been innovate where you differentiate. If you're a commercial organization, or even if you're not, understanding what you do better than anyone else in the world that's going to have the greatest impact, and putting your energies there will give you a greater return, a greater impact than trying to solve every problem equally, because not every problem has the same level of impact.
Absolutely. And at the end of the day, there's limited resources, no matter what size organization you are. There's a limited amount of time and energy you have. So you want to focus and maximize the bang for your buck for innovation. I love that phrase, by the way, innovate where you differentiate. I'm going to tweet that out at some point. Great stuff. So let's talk about some anti-patterns too, right? I think you told me what you like to do, but what are some of the things that people do? For example, like innovation theater is a phrase I hear quite a bit, is where people are doing innovation, making it sound cool just from a marketing and branding exercise, but not really from a value creation exercise.
I think it comes back to something I alluded to a little bit, is focusing on ideas or solutions rather than problems. So, I'm sure you've heard this expression, don't bring me problems, bring me solutions. I mean, that's what, we've been taught from pretty much day one in the world of business. And I think that's actually the wrong perspective. Give me bigger, meatier, juicier problems, and I'll be a happy person. So when I look at a lot of the innovation theater that goes on, and there's so many different ones. I mean, one which I talked about in my book, Best Practices Are Stupid, is when the Deepwater Horizon oil rig explosion happened. They tried 7 different innovations to stop the flow of the oil. Nothing worked. So they decided to do something which was innovation theater. They decided to set up a website where they asked people to submit their ideas on how to stop the flow of the oil. Now, they got 123,000 submissions, none of which had anything to do with the final solution. There was like 0.001% of them even considered to be viable or interesting. Now, if you think about that, 123,000 submissions, somebody had to go through and evaluate those, study them. It's just a ridiculous amount of theater. It was done to say, look, we're doing what we can, as opposed to saying, let's figure out what is the leverage point. What's the factor that if we could solve this would have a bigger impact? If they took the time to redefine the problem, they may have found a solution more quickly than wasting their energy on 123,000 irrelevant ideas.
Well, now I'm curious, how do they do it in the end?
It's a pretty complicated technical thing, which I don't even fully understand. But it had something to do with cement and packing it in. And I'm sure there's a person who understands engineering at a level that I don't.
Yeah, yeah. But I guess the moral of the story being you can do innovation theater and not get much for it. You can certainly burn a lot of resources while you do it.
Absolutely. Absolutely.
Okay.
And I think the issue in that case was, look, I love crowdsourcing. So that's basically what they did is they said, look, we'll ask citizens to provide their solutions. I have no problem with that. They were lazy with the question. They didn't provide enough insight, detail, and depth into the problem statement to find a solution. Now, can I give you just an alternative use of crowdsourcing real quickly? Because I love this
Yeah.
story. So 1989, there was another oil spill. This is the Exxon Valdez oil spill in Alaska. And for nearly 20 years, from 1989 to 2007, they could not remove the oil because it was trapped inside of this area called Prince William Sound. And they spent a ton of money trying to figure out how do we extract this oil water mixture. But the issue was the temperatures in Alaska were freezing. So the problem that they tried to solve was how can we prevent an oil water mixture from freezing? And the assumption there was that it was an oil problem or it was a temperature problem. Actually, it was a common fluid dynamics issue called viscous shearing, which basically means any dense liquid that's put under a force or acceleration will start to act like a solid. So when they asked a different question, when they said, how can we prevent or eliminate or reduce viscous shearing inside of a dense liquid, they used crowdsourcing. They found a solution in 6 weeks. They paid $20,000 for the solution, and it worked. And the solution came from somebody in the construction industry who was working with cement chutes that clogged, and he had developed a way of vibrating the molecules to prevent them from seizing. And they used that same technology in Alaska and solved the problem. So I love crowdsourcing, but you have to ask the right question of the crowd.
Very good. Yeah, yeah. The word you used was lazy, and I love that word because it is lazy to ask the wrong question and make it somebody else's problem to solve this thing when you've asked a lazy question. So I really like the phrasing there because it really is up to the leaders who own the problem domain to ask it in the right way to allow other people to engage with that. Yeah, that's so critical, and that's part of what I loved about your book in Invisible Solutions too. There's so many different ways and so many perspectives and lenses you can take to a particular problem. Very powerful stuff. So yeah, without further ado, let's get into your book. What's pivotal about? I kind of know, but I'll let you speak to it. And what made you want to go there, and how does it help average Joe in innovation departments around the world?
Sure. So first of all, we're both in Orlando. We both have a love of the Orlando Magic. You were, running the Orlando Magic Innovation Challenge, which was a lot of fun. And so when I think about basketball, there's a move that everybody talks about in basketball, which is the pivot. Now, in business, we use the word pivot. And what's fascinating is in business and in basketball, when we think about a pivot, we're thinking about the movement. In basketball, it's the foot that's moving. It's the one that's going around in circles. When we talk about pivoting in business, we're talking about changing direction. The pandemic hit, we can't eat in restaurants. Okay, how do we pivot to deliver? Okay, people are concerned about safety. How do we make our offerings safer? And then you have inflation, and then you have supply chain interruptions, and we're pivoting and spinning around in circle. Here's the fascinating thing, which most people don't ever see. When you're watching a basketball player execute a pivot, yes, there's one foot that's moving, but there's one foot that's firmly planted to the ground. You do not have a pivot in basketball without that planted foot. And that's what pivotal is about. It is about that stable foot that provides a foundation on which everything else is built. So when you do need to change direction, you're going from a position of power rather than like most people do, which is like changing direction frantically on quicksand. So the subtitle of the book is Pivotal: Creating Stability in an uncertain world. And the general premise of it is that we focused way too much on what's new, not on what's now. And we haven't spent enough time thinking about, instead of what should change, we need to really start investing in what shouldn't change. What are the timeless aspects of our business that are going to stand the test of time? And it really just helps bring some level of clarity to companies that right now are inundated with distractions and opportunities and can't tell the difference between them.
Got it. So how does a company that wants to apply that kind of approach this problem of knowing what is it that they should focus on as the thing that's going to stand the test of time? How do they go about identifying that?
So it comes back to the expression I said before, which is innovate where you differentiate. And so the first thing is to figure out what is your differentiator. And your differentiator isn't what makes you different. That's a common mistake. A differentiator is actually a combination of different aspects. I have 5 Ds, but basically it's what you do that is different, that is desirable, and will stand the test of time. And so the 5 Ds just real quickly are distinctive. That's the different part. So it has to be something which, otherwise you're a commodity if you're not distinctive. Plus you have to be desirable. You have to create something that the world wants. Creating something that's different, that's not desirable, is not valuable. It has to be durable, and that it will be difficult for the competition to replicate it. Because if you do all this great work and you create something that's distinctive and somebody comes in and just copies it, that's not very useful to you. But it has to be dynamic, which means that yes, there are times when we do need to shift direction when the world dictates that's the case. And then the last D is all around leveraging it. How do you disseminate your differentiator internally and externally? So when you get those, the first 3 Ds in particular is where we start, is making sure that whatever you think makes you special is distinctive, desirable, internally and externally, and durable. And if you start from there, now you can start putting your innovation efforts there.
That makes sense. Yeah, that's the kind of level of detail that I think people need to start thinking about their business, because it's so hard, right? I mean, a lot of folks have different perceptions of what they think their company is about, but having a clear set of filters of identifying, this is not this might be distinctive and desirable, but it's not durable, or it's desirable, but it's not distinctive or durable, and that kind of thing. Allowing people a way to find that specific thing that they really need to focus on to double down and grow their company is absolutely critical. Now, obviously, I'm going to ask you, maybe everybody has. I don't think you can do a podcast in tech anymore without asking about AI, so I'm just following the rules here. AI is going to change a lot of things in a lot of different ways, and it's going to change it is already changing very, very quickly. In fact, it's changing so fast that people's heads are spinning. And that's why your book, Pivotal, is so timely, because literally people are pivoting left and right and back to left, and they don't know kind of how to respond to this threat. So it could be a threat. It could be a force multiplier. And a lot of people are trying to figure that out. Like, how much are they a threat? How much of this is going to help them to boost what they're currently doing and multiply what they're able to do with that? So I'm assuming you've had those conversations with a number of folks and who are asking you for advice on, okay, we're trying to innovate. We need AI. How do we do AI? And applying the 5D methodology that you have, where does AI fit into it? Or do you not even see that as a thing? You just see, like, okay, first you find the differentiator that makes you unique, the thing that you're holding as your pivotal part of your business, and then you figure out how to leverage AI on top of it? Or do you feel like you need a separate methodology for AI?
So there's a separate framework that's not specifically for AI, but it's another framework that I talk about in the book, which basically says, well, once you understand what your differentiator is, it's important to take a look at your work and your investments and prioritize. And so when I look at the activities that people perform inside of companies, and I want to be clear, these aren't departments, functions, roles, people. These are activities. And every person in every department does a combination of these 3. So the bottom category are activities that are support in nature. They don't create customer value. they create internal value, they support the business. They're things that we need to do, like paying people. Some of our meetings might be considered support. There's a number of different support activities. Customers don't care that you have a great payroll system. So that's sort of the lowest level. It's the next two levels that get interesting. At the highest level, it's going to be differentiating work. But it's for a lot of companies, they struggle to distinguish differentiating from that second level, which is core. Now, core, these are the table stakes. These are the expectations. They aren't the reason someone will do business with you, but if you get it wrong, it could be the reason someone leaves. And your core doesn't have to be the best in the world. It just has to be efficient. It has to be high levels of quality. And it is something which is not your differentiator. Therefore, you shouldn't be developing new custom approaches to it. You shouldn't be innovating there. So all that is background. When I look at AI, unless you are a company like Accenture, my alma mater, which is spending like $1 billion on AI, unless you are an AI-centric company, that is our strategy, we differentiate because we offer AI services. For almost every other organization, AI is core. Now, I want to be clear though, when it's core, it's table stakes, which means you have to have it. But if you try to be the world's best at AI and you're a healthcare system, you're missing the ball because you're taking your eye off your differentiator, whatever makes you special. Because the technology, as you said, is changing so rapidly. And so if you try to invest all your energy in AI, by the time that you implement something, somebody else, the technology's evolved and they've implemented something better. So it's all about, in those situations, what you want to do is find the right strategy, which often is partnering with a company that has AI as their differentiator so that you can focus on what your differentiator is.
That makes sense. And I'm trying to, this might be a kind of a meaty conversation, but let's see how far we can get into it. If you think about the different waves of disruption that we've seen in the past, right? You know, when we had personal computing, or when we had the internet, when we had e-commerce, when we had mobile, right? Each of these waves came in, and yes, they were kind of a table stakes. They ended up being a table stakes thing, but before it got to the table stakes thing, there was a Wild West thing, gold rush thing, right? First mover advantage and all of that stuff. So even though it might be a core thing, if you weren't adopting it fast enough, like you were a laggard, for example, in adoption, you were basically disrupted. And so there is a risk there where, you know, if you're a late adopter or a laggard of a technology, even if it's like not your core differentiator, it's not a differentiator, it could be a core thing, or it might be a support thing. But even in those areas, you need to adopt the technology quickly. And this cycle is viciously fast. Like the speed at which it's going is so much faster than any other cycle we've seen in terms of certain industries adopting AI, compared to how long it took for everybody to get on mobile and for how long it took everybody to get on the internet. This is viciously fast, and it's only been a year and something months since ChatGPT was released, if you can believe it. It feels like it's been 5 years already. So how do you account for that? Like, how do we talk about adoption? I mean, that's not you doing custom things, it's just you adopting what's already there, versus, you know, you doing something custom there.
Yeah, I think adopting, absolutely, because if you are a laggard, then again, with table stakes, the whole point of it is if you don't have it, nobody's going to do business with you. But the fact that you have AI baked into what you do is probably not going to be the reason someone does business with you. So you have to have it. It has to be of world-class quality, but it doesn't need to be a unique solution. It's not something that has to be custom. It doesn't have to be your own special spin on it, but you have to do it well. And the problem is now, unlike with the web and mobile, where the evolution of that technology was a little slower, so it was measured in years, now we're talking about months and days. So if you put all your energy trying to differentiate yourself on whatever AI technology and AI capabilities you build, by the time you implement them, they're already obsolete. So you do have to keep on adopting. I'm definitely not saying become a laggard or do nothing, But you have to recognize that you as an organization, unless you plan on spending all your time becoming the world's greatest expert in AI, you're always going to be behind. So if you partner with the right organizations that are staying on the bleeding edge of it, then that's always going to be the best strategy, because you can't do it if you're a consumer goods company or a healthcare organization or a hospital or a hotel. You're never going to be the world's best at AI. So why would you want to do that?
Right, right. No, I think that's a very important distinction, and I wanted to make sure the audience was clear about it, which, you spelled it out pretty clearly there in terms of adoption versus differentiation. And that's a big one. But to follow up on that though, because of the velocity of this thing, being how do we prioritize the differentiation aspect? So let's talk about that piece, right? We talked about adoption piece, but how much of your energy should you be spending on the adoption side to just keep up with the Joneses versus how much time and money should you invest in terms of your R&D resources on differentiation and applying AI to differentiate yourself? I mean, yeah, I know you have a perfect number there, but just any guidance there?
Yeah, I certainly don't have any perfect numbers. And here's one of the things which I've found, though, is when I look at companies, so let's find a way of, instead of trying to figure out how much, let's talk about how do we find more time, more money, which is a slightly different question, but it might lead us down an interesting path. So let's come back to, let's ignore support for the moment, and let's just talk about core and differentiating. When I go into companies and look at their investments, like where are they spending money on innovation and new custom developed solutions, things of that nature, 80% of investments are almost always, 70 to 80% of investments are almost always in core, and only 20 to 30% of investments are in differentiating. So the first thing to do is recognize, let's stop putting all the heavy investment in core in general, and let's find people who already have solutions so we can do the custom work on what differentiates us. Now, sometimes that means customizing the core work that somebody else does, but that's the first thing, is let's make some money. Let's free up some money and time by not investing in the things that are core quite so heavily. Once we do that, then we at least have maybe 20% of our time to invest in AI. 20% is not a terrible number, might be a little high, and it's going to vary from department to department, person to person, but as an aggregate, 10 to 20%. But I think the key thing also with AI is, look, it can be used to automate support activities. It can help improve core activities, but the best use for AI would be, how do I take them and augment my differentiating capabilities through AI to take them to the next level? And that's a different question than saying spending money on AI. It's now leveraging AI for differentiation. And again, you're not going to differentiate yourself on your knowledge of AI, but what it does for you could help you differentiate.
That makes sense. I think part of it is also, while you've talked about defining the problem well, and that is obviously very important, but in the AI space, a lot of the leaders can't conceive of the solutions either, right? So that is a separate problem, which is, okay, let's assume that you know what your differentiator is, and your 5Ds, and you identified that. Still, from that point, going to how do we AI enable this is not the same as saying, how do we web enable this, or how we mobile enable this, right? So is there a different methodology that you go with for that piece?
I think the concept is pretty much the same. I use Accenture because I spent 15 years with them. If I were a large organization, I would find a company that's spending its time understanding the changing landscape of technology, so that when you have a smart conversation with them, you say, here's our differentiator. What kinds of AI enablement can we do that's going to take that to the next level? Doesn't mean you don't do core and support with AI, but if you can leverage it for differentiation, it's even more valuable. But I think that's a conversation that, again, and you said this beautifully, the leaders don't know the technology. It's going to evolve so fast. They don't know what it can do. And so do you want them spending all their time trying to figure that out, or partner with somebody who is spending their time trying to stay on the leading edge of things and have them help you through the process? But it really comes back to what's the right question. I think sometimes the right question is, how do we leverage AI to help us differentiate further? And who do we partner with in order to make that happen? And don't get into the weeds of the technology. I think the unfortunate thing is when I hear a lot of people speaking about technology or about AI, it's always the technology. We could do this, we could do that. We got this cool, we can create videos, we could do this. And look, technology is great, but technology will change. But the concepts of how we can leverage them are sort of going to be somewhat timeless, even as the technology evolves.
You nailed it, absolutely. And I think that's I do innovation consulting myself. We do software development as well. So you're definitely speaking my love language there when you say that, I would love to have my clients narrow down the ocean of possibility, right? Let's not talk about every single thing that you could AI enable. Let's talk about the thing that's going to make a difference and give you a competitive advantage in your business. And that's really where we want to play as well. And once we've narrowed down that piece, I would love to have the conversation on, okay, this is your core business, this is your differentiator, this is what you hope will happen in the future that's going to multiply your business. And if you want to AI enable that, yeah, sure, let's have a conversation. We can brainstorm and find like 5 different ways we could potentially do it. And the good thing about AI, as you know, is the cost of implementation and deployment is actually very, very low. And compared to any other tech adoption out there, I mean, we're talking like tens of thousands of dollars, hundreds of thousands of dollars instead of multi-million dollars, and massive changes in workflow. So the possibilities are great. The investment required, the return on investment is great. The investment itself could be pretty low. It's just a matter of focusing your attention on the right thing. And I think your book is a real key resource for people to help identify where do they point that searchlight as they look at their organization, to really look at the starting point of the thing that's going to give them the biggest bang for the buck. So it's I really love that, the way you've put that together. So
can I build on that just a little bit more? Because there's everything you're saying is like spot on. I just want to build on a couple things, which is, so if you're for your support work, I would not be going to a partner saying, I need the best AI solution for this. I would go to a partner who will, in their solution, use AI. So again, payroll, just it's an easy example. I'm not going to go to an AI expert and say, give me the best AI tools to improve payroll, but I might go to an ADP, assuming they are going to have the world's best AI technology in their solution. So I get the benefit of AI through my outsourcing partner for the support work. Same with the core. One of the examples I talk about in the book is automotive insurance claims. None of the major automotive insurance companies feel like the technology that is used in the repair centers has to be the best. As long as it works and it works well without any errors and it's efficient, that's all that matters. So there's one company, CCC. They're in 25,000 of 40,000 repair centers. If you have insurance with State Farm, you're 100% guaranteed that your repair center will be with CCC, because that's a requirement. Because basically the insurance companies have said, we're not investing in this technology. It's core. It has to work, but it doesn't have to be the best. So again, from an AI perspective, I'm going to assume a company like CCC is going to use AI in their solution, and they become our preferred partner. So it's only when I'm talking about the Accentures of the world is at that differentiating level, because you have to make an assumption that your partners at the core and support are integrating AI in their solutions rather than you trying to integrate it into yourself custom, because that's just way too difficult.
That's a great point. And to make it a little bit clearer for folks that are wondering, well, I've got so many needs all across the organization, how can AI help me with all of them? You've just simplified that for them. You just said, basically, hold your vendors accountable, right? If your vendors are not keeping up with technology, and you can ask them, hey, what's your AI enablement strategy for supporting payroll? What's your AI enablement strategy for my HR solutions? And if they don't have a good enough answer, that might be a signal to you to shop around and to look at options that do AI and do give you the benefits of AI without having you do anything on your end. So that's a great way to actually do some vendor management and vendor selection as well, especially for folks that are in the decision-making process right now.
Yeah, because
That's right.
look, AI should be table stakes for your partners. So not only is it table stakes for you, but when you look to any company that differentiates, they have to have an AI strategy, and it has to be clearly articulated, and it has to fit in with what you need. And if they do that, you just assume they're going to do it right, and you don't think about it. That's just the nature of those relationships. But once you start spending 80% of your time on core and everything that you do is custom, and now everything has to have an AI enablement strategy, well, now you're going to drown.
Yeah. Yep. And that is the thing, that is the word I hear. Actually, the word you use, drown, is exactly the word I hear quite a bit from a lot of the leaders, is like they're drowning with all this information and there's so many different ways to use AI and they don't know where to start. So I think this conversation is so timely and really, I mean, the book is not written for AI specifically. It's written for kind of understanding your strategy overall. But I think it really applies really well for the age of disruption with AI that we're in right now. So I think it's perfect. Cool. Well, speaking of the age of disruption, it's definitely not a one-time blip that we're seeing with AI. There's all kinds of disruption that is on our horizon. We don't know what is going to be next. We saw a big wave and crash with blockchain. We saw another wave and crash with Meta and all the moving to the multiverse and all of that stuff. Not multiverse, metaverse. Hasn't happened yet. I think a lot of the tech folks would agree that some version of that is definitely going to be kind of all over the place, and everybody's going to be on the metaverse eventually, and everybody's going to be using some form of blockchain in their lives eventually. But how do you think about the future in terms of the methodologies, innovation methodologies, and kind of helping people navigate? I think Pivotal is a great framework to make sense of that. But as new technology comes in that we basically have no conception of what it's going to do, do you have any other ways of thinking about how to approach kind of futurism, if you will?
Sure. And I think the same framework we talked about, the support core and differentiating, everything we talked about with AI applies to everything. So if blockchain becomes the new global ledger for everything that we're doing in terms of tracking supply chain, cool. That's an expectation. That's table stakes. Get your vendors to do it. You don't have to worry about it. Here's what I think is more interesting. When we talk about disruption, we tend to focus on technology. And I think some of the other disruptions which people often miss is changes in buyer behavior or knockoff effects of particular technologies. So for example, let's talk about the domino effect of technology. Autonomous vehicles, when that actually happens, and it fully happens, the impact on parking garages, insurance, like automotive insurance, totally going to change. Like if an accident happens, who's at fault? Do you need insurance? Is it the car? Do people even own cars? If I want a car, I just push a button, the car's delivered to me automatically. I get in the car, it takes me where I want to go. Okay, well, that changes the game a lot. So there's that aspect that we need to be thinking about, which is not about a technology, but rather technology's impact on the larger society, which then leads us to the question about whether it's smoking. I've done work with some of the cigarette companies that are now trying to move away from tobacco. Okay, well, how do you create safe recreational products for a company that makes 100% of its income from tobacco? It's an interesting challenge. So I think these societal changes, people wanting things that are healthier, wanting things that are better for the environment, whatever it might be, those have big impacts on companies. And I'm as worried about those as I am new technologies, because those can be even more disruptive at a strategic level than sometimes even the technologies.
Right. 100%. And while you have a framework in the 5Ds, are part of that framework for Pivotal, at the end of the day, the 5Ds is still a judgment call, right? What do you think is desirable? What do you think as a leader is durable? Because if you don't have the right sense of where the future is headed, and as you said, user behavior is going to change, what you thought was desirable may no longer be desirable, in the future. So you do still have to keep an eye out for what's happening, what the trends are, what your competitors are doing, how these trends could potentially affect user behavior. And your 5D matrix that you apply to filter to those things that are your differentiator will have to be adjusted accordingly.
Absolutely. That's what the dynamic D is all about, is it's recognizing that there are places that you have some level of certainty, so we can double down and build that solid platform. But there are times, coming back to the pivot, there is a foot that moves. Okay, well, you have to have some level of adaptability in your business. And the key difference for me is, as you have more certainty, to me, certainty is based on our differentiator and the first 3Ds. As you move into the fourth D, the dynamic D, well, we have less certainty, less confidence in the future. And so this is where the idea of experimentation and betting and portfolio diversification and all those things become really critical, because if you make one bad bet and you were wrong, you're in trouble. Now, you could be right and it might pay off great, but unfortunately, the world's littered with companies that have made really big bets on a concept, and we only, survivorship bias. We only hear the successes, all the ones that are great, that are on the front page of magazines, but the millions that tried something different and it failed, we never hear about them. And I think
except for Blockbuster, everybody still remembers them. They're perfect. They're the perfect
yeah.
case.
Blockbuster, the company that's dead that will never die. So, but but that's the thing. So you maybe place some small bets, and that's how I think about it. Is when you have a high level of certainty, you place a bigger bet. As your level of confidence and certainty diminishes, you place smaller bets. And in the dynamic section, we go through that whole betting methodology to help people make better determination on that.
Absolutely. So, I mean, the core principles of innovation still apply. You start off, the more wide your aperture is when you have less certainty, and then you kind of narrow that down to and increase your bets when you have a sharp aperture and you have clarity on what and validation. Really, at the end of the day, if you can validate with a high degree of certainty that customers want this thing, the best validation, as we all know, is them putting money down. So if they put money down, they're pre-ordering, they've already bought the product, you've got high customer satisfaction, NPS scores. That's great validation for you to double down. Yeah.
Well, and from the startup world, I mean, it's critical to not place all your money on something until you validate. I mean, your world is all around having a very solid validation model, and it's whether you're a small startup or you're a big company venturing off the beaten path a little bit, the methodology is pretty much the same, which is validate, test, and make sure that when you're doing the testing, this is sort of one of my pet peeves. You asked earlier on, like, what do people get wrong? I think one of the biggest enemies of innovation is actually not "yeah, but," which shuts down an investment, but wow, this is a great idea. Because I think once people have in their head, this is a great idea, confirmation bias kicks in. And now, no matter what you do with your experiments, no matter what information it gives you, you're only going to see the evidence that says, this is a great idea. And you invest more, and you invest more, and you invest more. And you end up with, I love this quote from Scott Cook at Intuit. He said, for each and every one of our failures, we had spreadsheets that looked awesome. And I just think that's an absolutely brilliant quote, because we can justify anything, but it doesn't mean it's right. And I know this is your world about the validation. You got to do it right. You get it wrong, and it doesn't matter.
Yeah, absolutely. And it's a hard thing, right? Because if and this actually probably is a good segue to talk about culture and how the culture shifts, because one of the phrases in the innovation methodology crowd is HIPPO, which is the highest paid person's opinion, right? And so if that person comes in with a strong opinion and has whatever links to articles that sound great, or a spreadsheet that they threw together on their own, and like you said, for every one of our failures, we have a spreadsheet that looks awesome. There could also be a blog article. You could pretty much substitute that with anything. Like, this blog article says we should do this, right? But the culture of accountability and innovation is where, everybody's idea is kind of equal. And for you to prove that your idea is better than other people's ideas, the metric is validation. And that mechanism of that, for me, I feel like the faster the pace of disruption gets, and I'm heading to a question here, bear with me. The faster the pace of disruption gets, my theory is that innovation methodology gets more and more important, because it's not so much about, like, your differentiator used to be that you had this high technology or you had this big platform or whatever you had, because now a kid in the basement can generate code that can get you 80% to what you have within a weekend, right? And so the way that the advantage that you had, the moat and the durability that you had, that advantage is definitely shrinking. So the culture that you create with the methodologies and the processes and building those frameworks and following some of the ideas that you have here, for me, that's what's going to help companies win, right? And if you really buy into it, the culture at the end of the day is what wins out. Any thoughts on that?
Yeah, absolutely. So first of all, one thing which I didn't say that's probably important to say is when we talk about differentiators, it is almost never a technology, a product, a service, an offering. It is a capability that allows you to create new products, services, and offerings. And that's where you put your energy into, but it's rarely, if ever, a product or a technology. So if you think that we have a distinctive technology and that is our differentiator, the odds are, just as you said, people can reverse engineer that, create it in a weekend these days. So it's unlikely. So there has to be other differentiators that you have that are going to be important. And it's typically some kind of capability. We could dig deep into that. The other thing when it comes to culture, it's a company that I find really fascinating. It's called Koch Industries, Koch, out of Wichita, Kansas. They are the second largest privately held company in the country. And they are in oil, gas, petrochemicals, paper, pulp. I mean, they're diverse businesses, and they have a methodology called experimental discovery. And their philosophy is no one at the top of the organization has any clue what is needed for the business. We don't have a clue as to what's needed in a product, and we certainly don't know what's needed at a particular geography. And so their philosophy is they give lots of money to the lowest levels of the organization to conduct experiments. And if the experiments are successful, they get more money. And in some cases, they get a percentage of the profits from a new experiment that was successful. And it just works really, really well because their whole point is about accountability. One story they told me, which I thought was a great one, is they're in a dangerous industry. And so they wanted to reduce the number of accidents. And so the natural reaction would be like, let's hire more safety inspectors. If we hire more safety inspectors, we'll reduce the accidents. But that went opposite of their philosophy, which is to push decision-making to the lowest level. So they got rid of the safety department and basically said, safety is the responsibility of every person, and we will reward people for either identifying safety issues or for fixing safety problems. Within 1 year of making that shift, they cut the number of accidents down by 50%. The next year was another 50%. They went from being sort of average to one of the best in the world by basically indoctrinating this mindset of safety inside the company. Now imagine if you did that same thing with innovation. You did the same thing with AI. You have everybody who understands it's my responsibility to do things. It's not somebody else's responsibility. Then you have a fundamentally different culture.
That was a fantastic example, because at the end of the day, people do what their role definition, what they think their role definition is, and what they're incentivized to do. So if you can build your culture around those two things, what is your job and what are you incentivized to do? it makes all the difference. A lot of people go around calling themselves entrepreneurs, right? But are they really entrepreneurial? And I think the example you gave from the coach thing with the experimental discovery, where you actually are giving money out and you're acting like an actual entrepreneur, and you have a stake with equity in the results of what you create, that is true entrepreneurship, right? You have an equity stake in the thing that you build, and you get exponential returns from the success of the thing that you built. Whereas everything else, people who call themselves entrepreneurs, but they're doing things, but they're not incentivized in a way that true entrepreneurs are incentivized, will have substandard results compared to a true entrepreneur in the wild.
Yeah, absolutely.
That's great. I love that example. I haven't actually heard of that before, so this is a new one for me. I love to learn. I'm going to look up that case study shortly after this one. But cool. So we're almost out of time here, but I would love to get some resources and anything else, potentially words of wisdom for our audience that you would point them to, resources or podcasts or things that you watch or things that you like that might benefit our audience.
So obviously, always love for people to get one of my books. So if people are interested, that's awesome. Pivotal and Invisible Solutions in particular. It's interesting. I tend to be less focused on podcasts and more interested in conversations with people outside my industry. And I guess if I were to give people one piece of advice, I would have them take advantage of something which I call purposeful tangents. There's numerous studies that show that the best breakthroughs that are developed are almost never developed by an expert in a particular industry, but rather somebody who's tangentially related to it. And I'll give you just a quick example of a company that I love, or not a company, but a conference. It's called Pumps and Pipes. It is cardiologists who get together on a regular basis with people from the oil and gas pipeline industry. And you think, what a weird combination. But actually, they have something in common, which is the movement of a fluid through a tube. And the things they've developed are amazing. An oil pipeline engineer actually developed a filter that cardiologists now use to break up clots in the body. It is based on a technology used in oil pipelines. Brilliant. So I always encourage people to say, well, what's a purposeful tangent? As an innovation person, I love magic. Magicians are trying to apparently make the impossible possible. So I study magicians. I hang out with magicians. What can you do that would be tangential to your world, whatever you do, and hang out with those people? So it's not a podcast, but rather it's a body of work that you could tap into and get some new insights.
Oh, I love that. Absolutely. And I think that for me, when people ask me to define what creativity is, I think it's just pattern matching, right? At the end of the day, you take a pattern from one thing that is completely different from the thing that you're doing, but the underlying abstract pattern of what you're doing there can be reapplied in a different place. And I was playing tennis with my son, and the technique of the forehand topspin and kind of training your brain to play the topspin so that even if you're tired, even if you're out of position, you know the right way to play it. And applying that to my other, daily skills where I'm doing management and leadership and being in conversations where you have the built-in response to a particular situation and building that technique. I'm just looking for patterns like that all the time. So this one really blew my mind. I've never heard of pumps and pipes before. Cardiologists and oil people in the same room talking about it. It just seems fantastic, but that's absolutely brilliant. I'm definitely going to check that one out as well. But yeah, this is why I love talking to you, Stephen. This is absolutely mine, which comes up every time we talk. And of course, I'm sure my audience is going to really enjoy this as well. Thanks again for sharing a few minutes of your time. And everybody who's listening out there, go check out the book Pivotal. It is definitely worth your time and money. Stephen, appreciate it. Thanks again for coming.
Thank you. My pleasure.
Have a great one. Take care.